that infrastructure announcement, the fact that it was made and underlined even in an interim budget, presumably gives you a lot of confidence that what we are seeing around us is going to continue and continue for a while.
I think it's a very heartening to see that there is a continuity in the policy. And I would say this budget is both about discipline and direction. The direction on infrastructure development and that focus continues. And it is not only about the 11.1 lakh crores announcement, but also other elements. For example, improving the connectivity, the focus on a dedicated freight corridors. Logistics cost is a big challenge that the country faces, from around 12 to 13%, whilst in the developed world, it is around 8%. So all of this also will contribute into further infrastructure development, more importantly, reducing the cost that some of us face. The other point I wanted to mention was also, when we look at infrastructure, we sometimes more look at the national projects, the big highways, etc. But also the role that the state governments play is very important. And I think that this disbursal of 75,000 crores to the state governments, I'm sure part of that will also translate into further improvement of infrastructure at the rural level through the state governments, again will be very positive.
And to take that point which you just made a little bit forward, infrastructure is often seen as railways and roads and airports, and of course it is there. And in this speech, she referred to all of those things, and there was growth. But what you were saying about the states is, we're now seeing a new approach where individual states can do things on a mission mode also. For example, around tourism. She correctly pointed out that India's got some of the most incredible tourism potential anywhere in the world, plus domestic tourism. So the fact that state governments will be induced to build world-class facilities in individual tourist areas, is that something that you think could also see an inflection point?
I think this will also have a multiplier effect. I think it's fantastic. And as tourists, when we visit, we travel, we see the challenge because of the lack of infrastructure, the connectivity, and I think this will sort of further spruce up the economy in the rural hamlets, because all of them will get benefit of more and more tourists visiting. So I think every element of infrastructure development has been connected. And as you rightly say, sometimes when we look at infrastructure, we only look at roads, highways or airports. But there are other critical elements of that particular system which has also been addressed, which is very positive as a part of this budget. And other point I want to talk about is discipline. I think 5.1% fiscal deficit. I think that also directionally is very, very positive.
So I'm actually trying to figure out where all of that is coming from, right? Because if there are no new taxes, and they aren't because taxes have not been changed, and yet India is spending the amount of money that it is now on infrastructure. I mean, 11.11 lakh crores. If you'd said 8 years ago, 7 years ago, that's the amount that India is going to be spending on infrastructure, most people would have struggled to believe it. So where's the money coming for all this?
So,
and there are welfare measures also taking place.
Well, I'm an engineer, not an economist, but I will hazard a guess. I think it's more about the improvement in the collections. We are seeing that whether it is through the toll collection, the GST collection, I think the Honorable Finance Minister alluded to that particular fact, that the discipline in collection is improving. And I think GST, we all agree, that has been a milestone and a landmark change. I'm sure all of this will benefit to put more money into the government's coffers, which they can further invest into infrastructure development.
Okay, let's get an economist in on that fiscal deficit and where the money for all this is coming from. Dr. Singh is still with us in the studio. Dr. Singh, how do you see the maths for all of this working out, right? More spending in areas like infrastructure, and yet the fiscal deficit is remaining fairly constant coming down to 5.1, and she's recommitting to that glide path that will try and bring it down to 4% and under. How is it happening? Is it entirely compliance, or is there something else to it?
I think it's a combination of growth and compliance. Both of them, so it's almost like a double engine, as most politicians talk about. So compliance is a big factor, and we are already seeing that the number of people who are filing tax is going up. The smaller entities which were out of the tax bracket are coming back. But this also has a double-edged sword, Vikram, because if the formalization of the economy gives you higher taxation, but in the short run, it's not such a great idea, because the small and the medium enterprises are hurt. So the government needs to also factor that in, at least for the next couple of years, to make sure that the MSMEs are not hurt to the extent that they start closing down. Having said that, I think the finance minister needs to be applauded for being fiscal, prudent, and 5.1 is a great number. I think the finance minister also has leeway, because the non-tax revenue can also go up, because if the economy is doing well, the income that comes from dividend, from the RBI, and of course the best of all is that she can always dip into the deepening fund, privatize or disinvest a couple of entities which are now doing really well, and the market price and the share price clearly demonstrates a part of that as well.
I think that's one interesting area which might be looked at. Of course, we'll have to see all the fine print for where the money is coming from. But coming back to, as you said, what's happening on the ground. So as TB and looking at what's happening in capital goods, the order books, what other capital good companies that you're aware are seeing this. How is all of this really translating at the grassroots? We see some of the roads coming up, but is that infrastructure spending actually translating at the ground level at improving things in a very dramatic manner?
I think it's a very good question, and I will give you 2 data points. One is the construction equipment industry in India last year grew by almost 28%. And the construction equipment in India in industry today is the 3rd largest in the world after North America and China. So, which certainly gives you an indication that more and more machines are sold, which are helping build the infrastructure. But I will give you one more data point. At JCB, we have got telematics on almost 2 lakh machines, and these machines communicate back with us. And we are seeing continuous improvement in the utilization of the machines which takes place. We have data right up to district level or village level, which tells us that certainly the utilization of the machines have grown compared to last 3 or 4 years. So I think both these data points tell us that what is being announced is getting translated on the ground.
How much more room do you think this infrastructure boom has to go? Is there still a long way to go before you actually become developed, you catch up with the US, you catch up with China? Presumably India still has a long way to go.
I think, again, I'll give you a data point. Like I said, the construction equipment industry has grown by 28%, but with that also we are selling only 80,000, 90,000 machines, while in China or USA it would be more than 250,000. So I feel, and we did a survey, by 2030 we expect this market to grow from around 80,000 machines to 250,000 machines. So I think we are truly at the start of the cusp of the growth in infrastructure, and we will see more and more development taking place in this sector.
All right. Well, Shobha Kamneni coming in to join us. Short speech, so we were all expecting to be sitting for another 1 hour listening to her. Or maybe we shouldn't have been expecting that, because at the end of the day, it is an interim budget. And she did say that she'll be back with, or somebody will be back in July with a full speech. But what did you make of what you did here?
First, I really liked what you said about, 28% growth. I think these are the stories that India needs of being able to grow. And so the new terminology of FDI, which is First Develop India, I love that. I think that we should use this more, because the speech also...
But do you sometimes need that FDI to develop India in the first place? Or is there enough capital in India now that you don't really need foreigners coming in?
I think that the nature of capital and the nature of tech has changed. But the way that we look at our industrial policy is still in the Purana Zamana. So if all that changes, because, instead of, I'm a big proponent of saying that here's a services sector contributes 54%. Really what we do, create jobs. I think that this is the sector that we need to really push more, because India needs more jobs. And when you're first developing India, when you're getting that, the capital will come, you have disruptions of AI and all these coming in. We have to upskill and reskill. So I liked what they said, from more medical colleges, more women and opening colleges, and giving them the push in STEM. These are important, even if it was a short speech. So we have to see the content of what was said. And I like some of that, as much as I like the fact that they kept the tax rates unchanged. Yeah. Sometimes it helps just to cool things down and keep things steady.
But it may only be for 3 or 4 months, right? Because you might have tax change rates, whenever the full budget is presented. But let's try and get, as I was just asking him to, from all the pronouncements that we hear, how are things actually transforming on the ground? So let me ask you about healthcare, right? From the hospitals and other space. She did refer to it. They opened up Ayushman Bharat to more and more people again. That was few more people, but ASHA workers and the rest. But how's that part of? This is one of perhaps the biggest bang announcement that we'd heard in the last 9-10 years when they came out and said Ayushman Bharat, let's try and have medical, insurance operating for everybody. There was talk at the review also that's being offered to more and more people access to healthcare. But how is that actually working on the ground, according to you?
It's actually working quite well. It's first of all, it is the largest healthcare insurance scheme in the world. So we have to, India needs to take credit for doing something so big and bold. And the fact that, there were some naysayers that said, oh, this is not going to work. It's actually working. Now they're increasing the reach. It was very rural. I think they're moving into the urban areas also. The state governments are all coming in because health is a state subject. So I'm very positive of what they've done in healthcare. The fact that they're going to convert more medical college, create medical colleges from the government hospitals they have. Ours is the first, which is in Chittoor. And I think that's an important point. They're good models to scale from. And you asked me about the spend. Vikram, pre-COVID, India used to spend around 1.5% of GDP on health, which is about the worst in the world. Because of COVID, they were forced to take it up to, in some areas, even 2.5%. Fortunately, we're still around that range.
Right.
So we've not gone down. So I think they're moving in terms of health development, and all these are good signs.
That's so interesting, because what today is, as an entire, if you step back a little bit and think, what's the exercise today all about? It's to take stock of what's happened in the last 10 years and to start talking about a possible roadmap for what could happen in the next 5 years, or at least what should happen in the next 5 years. So if we had to do that, if I was to rewind 10 years ago or even 15 years ago, what would we have been saying? We were saying, you need to spend a lot more on infrastructure. You need to spend a lot more on health and education. You need to do things like ease of doing business. Now, presumably that's work in progress. But on infrastructure and on health and education, how much of the agenda that you would have had 10 years ago has been fulfilled? And if there's something pending, what is still pending? I'll start with infrastructure and then come to healthcare.
I think overall, directionally, the way the government has focused, particularly in last few years, coming out of COVID, has been absolutely fantastic. And we are seeing that those policies getting translated into actions on the ground. There are two elements of infrastructure development, one which happens through the central government, and the second element which happens to the state government. I think the state government bit has been found a bit lagging compared to what we would have expected. But I'm equally very happy that last year's 50 lakh crores and 50,000 crores and this year's 75,000 crores will certainly help spruce up that investment which comes through the state government also. So overall, very, very positive what has happened in last 10 years.
So directionally, if you had a wish list, 3 or 4 things that just mentioned, some of the roadmap in railways and other areas, but what else would you hope to see in July?
I would say more specific information on allocation to the roads and highways, allocations to the railways. I think somewhere it must be there in the text, but something which regularly she has been announcing. I'm sure that will give us more confidence that more investment will take place in hardcore physical infrastructure development. The second point I wanted to make was focused announcement on rural infrastructure development. Through Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, Awas Yojana, we saw this announcement about 2 crore houses being built, but a similar announcement on the roads in the rural hamlets, I think, will be very, very important.